All right, everybody. Welcome to the Why Jesus podcast, episode 11, answering life's most important questions. I have my brother, Angel Quiroz, with me, and today we're going to be discussing a few Christian things that are going on in politics and the news today. So, Angel, what's up, brother? How you doing?
Good to be here, man. I'm happy and excited as always to just chat with you online and especially on YouTube here.
Yeah, likewise. And if you're listening to this on the streaming service after the audio only, I just want you guys to know that Angel is way more handsome than I am. So just in case you're wondering,
I will say that I'm definitely taller than John suspected. So that I can say.
And also, for those of you listening, I live in Puerto Rico. We just moved into a house, and I just set up a quick makeshift studio. So the soundproofing ain't on point, and our neighbors' dogs are insane. So if you hear that, I tried to buy those, frequency things where if they bark, it sends off a frequency, and they stop barking. Has not worked. Our dogs next door are super dogs. So, yeah. So if you hear that, that's what that is. And also if you hear coquis in the background, just letting you know. All right. So let's get right into it. Let me pull this up right here. I can't share it on the screen because I'm not that technically savvy yet. But what recently happened is Texas advanced a bill requiring the 10 Commandments to be displayed in public school classrooms. Yeah. So this, it's obviously has to go through the House and everything like that. But the legislation is Senate Bill 1515, and it's going to head to the House for consideration. So before we discuss this, Texas Republican Senator Phil King, what an epic name, Phil King. Yeah, said during a committee hearing earlier this month that he wanted the state to bring the 10 Commandments back into the classroom because they are a crucial part of the American heritage. The bill will remind students all across Texas of the importance of the fundamental foundation of America, King said during the hearing, according to the Texas Tribune. So I have my own opinions on this. So just so you guys that are listening know, me and Angel did not discuss how we felt about, this legislation prior to hopping on here. So I'm going to give one of my opinions on this, and then hopefully you could piggyback off that. But number one, I appreciate the recognition that this country was founded on biblical Judeo-Christian values, specifically Christian values, right? Mm-hmm. And not to say that every one of the founding fathers was a Christian. Some were deists, but this is where we got the Constitution from, right? Yep. So the all men are created equal, that's a biblical concept that was unheard of before, a Judeo-Christian worldview started influencing the world, right? The monarchy and the kings and the dictatorships and the rulers of nations, those were the ones who were above everyone else. And America did, flip the script and said, no, we're all equal. Even the people who are in charge are equal with the people who are not. So I appreciate that. Where my concern comes in is mandating in the public area something religious, right? Okay. Not to say that the principles aren't universal. And, I'm a Christian, so I don't say this without wrestling with it in my mind. I would love to be I do think that it is a good idea for everyone in public school, private school, this school, that. I think everyone should know what the 10 Commandments are and what this country was founded on. I definitely do. But where my fear comes in is people using this now as a tool to say, hey, well, if you're going to put your religious stuff up, we want to put our religious stuff up too. And then also, it just doubles down on you see how oppressive a religion, Christianity, is, forcing their religion on people in the public sphere. So those are my concerns about about this. So what are your thoughts?
I think that's already happening. I think the concerns that you have already, been existing in our culture. So, I work at Project Veritas. I think it's the first time I'm saying this on Why Jesus, but
Just shut
uh,
everything down. We have just got
yeah.
demonetized.
But
Oh
the reason
man.
I bring that up is because the stories that we've been doing a lot have to do with teachers in schools and principals in schools that have this incredibly liberal, far left mindset, and their political views are of that, and they use that in order to change the culture of the schools by changing the teachers of the schools, by changing the rules in the schools. And just because a thing doesn't fall under the umbrella of religion doesn't mean that it doesn't affect people morally. And I think that's the big discrepancy here, right? Because to me, you want to legislate that every classroom has to have 10 commandments in it, the 10 commandments in it. I don't see that as a big deal, really. Like, I think considering the roots of our country, considering the fact that the 10 commandments are more than a religious, couple Bible verses for me. I think it's something that needs to be, it's the foundation of our civilization, right? Just those rules in general. It's what we've used in order to provide moral clarity so that we can all be on the same page about living in proximity to each other. And so because of that, I think it's less about like, okay, well, this is going to open the door to more, people legislating other types of religion in schools. And I think it's really just about reclaiming what was originally something that was supposed to be traditionalist in the first place, which is education. I think the education system altogether, it was started by believers. It was started by this, the board of ed that we have in our country now is no more than like 60, 70 years old. Before that, education, schools, that was all handled by individual communities. And dating back into when they started, they were mostly religious to begin with. So I think it's kind of a false dichotomy to say like, oh well, then if we do this, then maybe they're going to start legislating, let's say, Satanism in the schools, because that's already happening.
Yeah.
So I think unless we start fighting back in this way, we can just kind of kiss that goodbye and all send our kids to homeschool.
Yeah, I mean, I'm down with the homeschool thing 100%. And so I didn't have that perspective of thinking about what's already happening in the schools. I didn't take that part into consideration when coming to my conclusion of this could open the door to XYZ. I haven't came to the conclusion whether it's good or bad that they want to do this. I just I have an issue with legislating anything that is that can be looked at as religious, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean I do think we should legislate Christian morals. I definitely do, because if we don't, this whole thing's going to fall apart. So how we do that is we get believers into power, and then the believers they take our votes, and then our votes move things in a more Christian direction. So I do think that we need to be influencing politics in that way. Martin Lloyd-Jones said his job as a preacher, when it came to politics, was to create Christians, so that way the Christians go into the political sphere and influence the politics and bring Christian values. So, taking into consideration what you're saying about what's already going on with the school system, I can understand the want to do this, and the need to be like, hey guys, you're taking this a little bit too far, and
I'll
we
give
need
you
to
an
bring
example
it
of what I
back.
mean by that, because I think like we can use examples to clarify. There was a teacher in Natoma School District in California who had a classroom full of flags. One of the flags was the gay flag, another flag was the trans flag, and another flag was the Che Guevara flag, and then a communist, what's this guy, Xi Jinping flag, right? And
I think
these
I
are
saw
all
this video.
these are all hung up in his classroom, and he would use the Mao stamp on kids' papers if they did a good job, and kind of use that as a way to like give them props on what they're doing. And some of the kids complained to him, and now there's undercover video that Project Veritas released that shows this teacher talking about the kids that were complaining, and he's saying, well, if these values that these people stood for make you feel uncomfortable, then maybe you're the type of person that shouldn't be in this school, or be allowed in this society anyway. And to me, it's already so far off the cliff with these radical gender ideology
Mm-hmm.
things, and this radical political agenda in the schools. I think it's at such a point that the fact that this bill has even gotten this far, to me, is astounding, because I personally don't think it's even going to pass. I don't think the House is going to pass it, to be honest. But I do think the fact that people are trying to push this into legislation, I think is a good thing. And I think it's an example of what you were mentioning earlier, which is Christians coming to power and steering things back towards a general direction. I mean, I know I grew up in Catholic school, but even in my public school, when I did go into high school for 2 years publicly, the golden rule was written on the chalkboards,
Mm-hmm.
and the 10 commandments were written in places, because it's just, like I said before, just common sense morality, right? It's where we get this idea of, like, society says it's okay. Well, yeah, because our society was built on the 10 commandments. So that's kind of my argument, and it's a short example of
Well,
something that I put
you've
out.
already swung me in your direction. Um, just taking into consideration you know, the environment that the schools are already in.
Yeah,
And people pulling this whole separation of church and state thing when it comes to religion, but they treat their ideologies like a religion. More like
right.
more like a cult, because if you don't agree with the cult, then you're ostracized, you're kicked out, you're tarnished, you're attacked. If we just saw the Riley Gaines incident, where
Yes.
she just went to speak at this event, and she was physically attacked and essentially held captive. She missed her flight.
Yeah.
And the police did absolutely nothing except wait
Right.
for a good moment to get her out. And so I do agree with you. It's already, we're already at that tipping point. Why
Yeah,
not why
and
not
John
push back
Root, who was
with some 10 commandments?
exactly John Root, who did a lot of coverage on that. He's from Turning Point Faith. That he mentions a lot how profound it is that it's not even just the education system, but like the athletic systems within the education system that are becoming more and more, I guess you could say, sympathetic or emboldening of causes like this. The idea of transgender uh, people who are becoming women, to compete against women, people that are born men becoming women to compete against women. That was whew, that was hard to say.
Yeah.
And but if you're following me,
Yeah,
there's a
yeah,
lot
yeah.
of those people that are doing this, and it's being advocated for by school boards, by teachers, by principals, by all these people. And so it feels like you're pinned into a corner where it's either like, like, just get rid of the whole board of education, and get rid of, the education system in America, and homeschool your kids, or fight back somehow.
Yeah.
And I think if we're going to fight back, I think, sure, little things like that are fine. And I'll even go as far as to say, like, the bill itself also wants people to have allotted time for people to pray in school and to read scripture in school. And I think that is a cool thing, because I mean, even teaching the Bible as an option in elementary schools, in public schools, would be a huge leap into the right direction, because they're not getting any exposure to any Christian values right now
Hmm.
in public schools. I mean, maybe in Texas, but definitely not up here in Jersey, in New York, in California. It's not even an option. Like, the Bible is an outdated document that we don't know if it's real. And I've asked kids who are in my congregation in church, like, what are you learning in school? And it's always some stuff about Columbus is a racist, and he was a slave owner, and he didn't actually discover America, and America's not a Christian nation. It's actually very inherently racist, and all these things that deserve conversations, but they're
Hmm.
getting one side of the conversation.
Yeah.
And so I think, like, that's the biggest problem we have with education, is we've put activists in charge of it and just let it run.
Yeah, that was bars right there. We put activists in charge of it and just let it run. Um, and it's no longer like, even when community members come in and voice their opinion, it's like they're shunned. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're kicked out. You remember that one guy who was losing his mind because his daughter was, essayed. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's it. Demonetized. His daughter was sexually attacked in the bathroom from a man, from a boy who was dressed like a girl and identifying as a girl, and then he's looked at as like he's crazy or whatever, and then you find out it was actually true, but they're silencing these people. And so yeah, you have definitely opened my mind to it. I was looking at it as like a binary situation. Oh man, there's that word. I was looking at it.
You're base pilled now.
Yeah. But I was looking at it through a very, because I get, in being in apologetics and in talking to people who are more left leaning, and I hear their concerns with, this caricature of Christianity that they have created for themselves in their mind, as well as many people on the far right perpetuating that caricature in actual existence, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh man, here's another thing that I'm gonna have to, be apologetic about, and get people to hear what the heck is actually going on, and show how
that's an interesting point. Like, and to your point, there is those characters on the right that are speaking that. And so people use the term fringe a lot, right? And if you think about like just the definition of the word fringe, like the fringe of something is the very edge of it. And on the fringe of the right, there are those people on the very edge. Very few people. There's like a couple big names in the whole thing that do believe in this, like, we need to return to Christian, not only nationalism, but imperialism by force, take back the country and kick out all the immigrants and do, like, people like that, right? There are those people, but it's very fringe. Whereas on the left, it's mainstream. Like the mainstream left, the president of the United States is like, let's trans the kids.
Yeah, this is bananas. They're setting themselves up though for a complete failure in the next election. Like, it doesn't matter what Republican runs against them, they have damaged the general approval of the American people.
Absolutely.
So, all right, we could stay on this topic for a very long time. We definitely could, because it goes down the rabbit hole of this. But I want to bring it back to what you said about how Christianity is the reason that there is public education. The first public schools weren't public schools. They were for you to be able to learn the Bible, right? Yeah. And then math got included in science and all this, but this was still done under the Christian umbrella, with, we need kids to be able to interpret and read scripture and know the values that we are to live by. We also need them to be educated in math and this stuff, so that way they're well-rounded individuals. And here we are, over 200 years later now, where the Christianity has been so removed from it that is now state. It's all state. And when now that things are handed over to the state, it's like, you can't have any religion in anything that's ran by the state, right?
I think it's always an interesting fact to bring up that the Board of Education in America is an invention by a president in like the 60s. And before that, every state just handled what they had to do as far as education went. Every town talks about what they wanted their school to be like, and every state talked about what they wanted their school system to be like. And it was very much decentralized, very much state run, because education has to deal with children, and the direct people responsible for children are their parents. And we've removed the ability for parents to have any say over what their kids are learning 6 hours a day. Yeah. And that to me is like an insane thing. And, I talked with Arthur about this, who's a good friend of the show. I think he's on My Jesus a bunch. And I know, John, he's been on your channel. But he has similar critiques, and I'm definitely more political than he is. I'll give him that. But that he homeschools his kids, and that's kind of why he thinks he can provide a better education for his children than the state of California can. And trust me, I don't have any doubts about that.
Yeah. I was listening to Ruslan the other day, and he was like, he's like, I bust my butt to homeschool my kids. Like, that's what we do out here. If you want your kids to have Christian values, and especially, it just makes absolutely no sense, period, to remove a child from the care of, at least the mother for 6 to 8 hours a day, getting influenced by God knows who.
We've gotten so used to that, right? Like that's become such a normal part of like American life, that kids are away from their parents the majority of the day.
Yeah.
That to me, like, growing up, I never even thought about it, but the more I like dive into this and I become more interested in history, the more I'm like, no, families used to raise their children and put them to work early to help with whatever they were doing on the farm or whatever their family trade was. And the father spent most of their time teaching the child the trade, and the mother teaching the daughter, whatever. But it's just, we're so far removed from kind of the natural rhythm and flow of life that we have this state-run country that inserts itself into every little crevice that we allow it to, and it just spreads.
Yeah, and it was originally designed to have more control to the states. Like, that was the purpose. It was originally designed that way, so that way the people local to the area who knew what was best for that area would have more control than the government, and the government was there to support that. The federal government was there to support those decisions and to help them if something crazy happens. Right. That's right. The government was there to leave you alone unless you really needed some help. That
to protect you from war, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. And what's interesting is, as we're talking about this, before we move on to the next subject, is I notice a big difference between people who are, a few generations already in the States than people who, maybe are one generation from, immigrants, right? Where, let's say your parents, right? I don't know if your parents are immigrants.
My parents are from Peru,
From Peru. All right. I'm sure you guys have a much more close-knit family environment than some of your friends who have been in the States 2, 3, 4 generations, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that I've noticed. It's also something that I appreciate about my wife's family a lot. Not that I don't appreciate my family's together, they're but there's a big difference, right? There's a difference in the culture of the family being together, and I've noticed that huge. I've noticed it with people who are, more new to the country. They have that we are raising everybody together, we are sticking together mentality more than people who are a few generations removed.
Yeah, let me tell you, you're hitting a spot for me, because it's very triggering to see, like, in particular, first generation Latino Americans constantly be like almost deceived by politics today and the beliefs that they're supposed to have because they're brown, when in reality we line up culturally. We line up way more with conservative values and way more with things that are happening on the right, like not getting taxed to death, and not departing, like spreading apart the family almost as soon as possible. Like, I remember telling, like, I grew up with, in the suburbs. So I grew up around a lot of white kids. I was one of 2, brown kids in my class growing up in elementary school. And I remember telling some of my friends that, like, I had cousins and stuff that still lived at home, and they were adults and they lived with their parents, but they weren't married yet. And it was the most foreign, complicated, hilarious thing to them. The idea that you wouldn't move out at 18 because, you just because you're 18. And so there's this huge disconnect with this first generation of Latinos that are were born here, and their parents are immigrants, where they see what their parents have and the culture and the values that their parents hold, and they see the opposite being sold to them. But because we're living in such a time where media and propaganda is so powerful, they're eating up the propaganda and almost getting separated from their families and being forced to become these liberal Latinx type, activists. And to me, that's just a sad reality of where we're at, especially here in New Jersey.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would love to ask a bunch of different parents questions, of like, hey, when you guys left your home country and came here for a better life, did you ever think that your kids would hate America?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. Like I think about what my family did. My mom coming here, she was a nanny for years when she got here. She lived in Jamaica, Queens, like in the hood, and this is in the 80s, so like it was not pretty. It wasn't gentrified.
Yeah.
And just thinking about the
The Supreme
sacrifices.
team.
Yeah, and thinking
Yep.
about the sacrifices that they made in order to like have me in the suburbs growing up going to a Catholic school and being able to ride my bike around town, going from poverty in Peru, poverty in New York City to where I'm at today. I'm just like this is a dream come true. It must feel really great for them, and I can't imagine being the type of person that looks at my parents who are immigrants and they're like, "Oh, this you brought me to a racist country."
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like
So
bananas. It's like
yeah.
also what I find funny too is that they'll say, "Oh, you brought me to a racist country," not realizing that the country you came from probably a little racist too.
Yeah.
You ever watch novellas?
Oh yeah.
There ain't no black people in novellas.
That's true.
Not a
That's true.
single one. Like there's a shade limit on how dark you can be. And
Absolutely.
so it's interesting how unaware people are, and I used to be pretty unaware myself.
Yeah.
So we everyone needs to go check out Angel's video, why he left the left. What's the title of it?
Yeah, it's called "Why I Left the Left, Walk Away," and
Yeah.
it's hashtag Walk Away, and it's one of the first videos on my channel. So if you go to it and you just go by most popular, you change like the way the feed works. It should pop right up. It's one of the first videos I did on YouTube talking
Yeah,
about politics.
very in depth and gives you a lot of good perspective, just on the thinking patterns of coming out essentially of the way that you once thought into how you think now. So the renewal of the mind, essentially,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
All right, moving on to the next subject. So we had a lot of people today get fired or leave.
Yeah,
They're
it's been a big day in media.
yeah. So first, I'm going to start off with the lesser known of all of them, but also a shock. Jeff
Okay.
Shells of NBC Universal was fired for an inappropriate relationship with one of the one of the staff members over there. So hold on, let me just read this right here. Jeff Shell, the NBC Universal chief executive who stepped down from his role on Sunday, was fired from the company after an anchor at one of his news networks lodged a sexual harassment complaint against him, according to a lawyer for the author. So, this, and I'm reading from the New York Times. So whenever I read about things that are happening to, whether it's a conservative or somebody more liberal, I always read from the liberal stuff, just so nobody can say you're only reading from the from the Daily Wire or something. You know? So like this is your guys saying it. So so we have that person who got fired. MSNBC. Well, not MSNBC. This is the NBC, right? Then we have CNN, where we hear CNN. Don Lemon
Yeah,
is fired from CNN. And there was I was watching a quote, like he didn't even know he was getting fired.
I
And
can't lie. It's hilarious.
yeah, it is pretty funny. So you're way more in tune with the whole politics and CNN, Fox News. You're in the news realm. So what are your thoughts on this whole Don Lemon getting fired? And make sure you guys listen and stay tuned, because we're going to talk about Tucker Carlson leaving Fox, and we got a video that we're going to show that can give you some insight into maybe why he got fired. So but first, your thoughts on Don Lemon.
Don Lemon is a funny one because CNN for a long time has been, the news that you can trust, quote unquote. That was their brand, right? When Jeff Zucker took it over, he's the one that pretty much started this idea of like a faux neutrality, like we're neutral, we're non-biased, because news. I don't know if people really understand this about media. It's very recent years, I think, since the Anchorman started, in the late 80s, in the mid 80s, that people have perceived the news as just being like non-biased and factual, just giving you the facts. Before that, pretty much all of journalism was partisan. Like, it was people with political agendas reporting on their enemies, and that's how you found things out. And so CNN becomes this huge behemoth and does this, and then somebody like Jeff Zucker takes the reins, and he goes full woke culture with it, and he starts giving these people kind of like autonomy to be commentary people and have opinions, and they build people like Don Lemon. The interesting thing is, Jeff Zucker recently, maybe about a year ago, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less, give or take, Jeff Zucker left CNN, and somebody new is in charge now. And so my gut instinct is that this has been in the works since that person took over CNN, and they're trying to take it in a different direction. Because just by working at Veritas, I'll tell you that CNN has never touched a story of ours unless it was to bash it and to bash the founder. But after they changed ownership, they did cover one of our stories. It escapes my mind which, but they did cover it, and they didn't. I mean, they still included their typical disclaimer of like they're a far right whatever, but they covered it, and they spread the news, and I thought that was a big step. So I get the feeling this has been in the works forever. They just made it last and made him unaware of it so that he wouldn't go on television and start acting irrational and start doing, I don't know if you've ever seen Bruce Almighty, but acting like Bruce Almighty when he got fired on the Maid of the Mist.
Yeah. they had what is the guy from 40-Year-Old Virgin speaking in tongues essentially on air.
Yep.
So yeah, from the little that I pay attention to that stuff, I noticed that they moved him around a lot.
Yeah.
They took him off prime time, they moved him to a morning show, then they moved him somewhere else, and then they just moved him out altogether. And I also remember reading that the new CEO wanted to take it in a new direction. They did not. They wanted to go back to neutrality and not, not have the narrative be so obvious, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and even if they still have their agenda, which to me, like, for somebody to say they don't have an agenda is kind of dishonest, right? I think everybody has some sort of agenda, some sort of bias. And so I think what they were trying to do is kind of just reset, like clear off the slate, just make sure like all of these people that we know are political activists, they need to go, and we need to bring in new people that we don't know if they are political activists or not. And so just kind of starting fresh in that way. And I think Don Lemon was a big part of that. He was the troublemaker. He is the guy that will tweet at people. He will, go and bash people for being racist right to their face. And CNN has always covered him. So I think I think it was planned. I don't think it's some part of some big media conspiracy like a lot of people on the right are saying right now. I just think people are way too dumb to follow in lockstep with that kind of a conspiracy.
Yeah. All right, so moving on to probably the biggest news, because you could kind of see the writing on the wall with Don Lemon, but Tucker Carlson is out at Fox, and he's not even doing one last episode. Like he is gone. His last episode was Friday. So the Washington Post says Tucker Carlson is out at Fox after Dominion lawsuit disclosures. So I think they're trying to tie it together. But before we talk about Tucker Carlson leaving, I want to play this video, and I sent it to Angel a while ago. I actually covered it on my channel, but give me one sec. We're going to play this video, and then we're going to come right back to discuss maybe this is why Tucker Carlson was fired. Just give me one sec. Why is this not showing up? Oh, I put it on the desktop. That's why. No, it's not there. What the heck are Ronies? Give me one sec.
It's all good.
I thought I had it all lined up, ready to go. It's going to be a smooth transition. Nope. No, sir.
This is what we call production value. I love it.
Yeah.
It's all good. That's how you know it's live.
All right, so keep talking.
Yeah.
So I can get this going.
I guess I'll just continue with Don Lemon for a little bit. The other thing I wanted to add about him is that he is going to be able to do whatever he wants. Like, he has built up so much credibility in this kind of woke media world. He'll literally have his own show on any channel that he wants, and I think like that's probably why, you know, there's not a bigger stink being made about it by him, that he's not going after anybody in, you know, retribution or anything. Like, he's going to be free. He's a free agent now, and I think there's going to be plenty of other places that are going to want to pick him up.
Yeah, I mean, people like that. Same thing with Tucker Carlson. Like, he's going to be able to do whatever, go wherever, and people are going to want to hear what he has to say. He's also probably going to write a book.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I think Don Lemon will definitely write a book. I'll be seeing it in the airport very, very soon.
Yeah, exactly. So, hold on, this thing is sending right now. Speaking of books, commercial break. I'm coming out with a book called Law of Attraction, Gateway Drug to Spiritual Heroin, where I debunk everything about the law of attraction. I expose the lies, the logical fallacies, the industry as well, exposing the nonsense that goes on in it. And you can pre-order your copy right now. It'll be available on Amazon May 16th, but you can pre-order a signed copy right now. So if you're hearing this before April 17th, we're doing signed copies April 27th. We're doing signed copies up until April 27th. After that, you'll just be able to pre-order, but I will not be signing them. So make sure that you guys get your copy today. And with that being said, this thing, I think, is loaded up. So
cool.
I
was just checking the date so I could see how long I have to order the book, so I could get a signed copy. So you got a few days left.
This is bananas. It just it just went over there. Just went, and give me 1 sec. Close this. Like it moved. I saw it go to the computer. I saw it, and now it's not there. Let me see if I could just do this.
Like, that is a big part of the revelation that's changed my life, is the media are part of the control apparatus. Like, there's no, yeah, I know, because you're younger and smarter and you're like, yeah. But what if you're me and you spent your whole life in that world, and to look around and all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow. Not only are they part of the problem, but I spent most of my life being part of the problem, defending the Iraq War. Like, I actually did that. Can you imagine if you did that?
What do you think? What is one of your biggest regrets in your career?
Oh, defending the Iraq War.
That is it?
Well, I've had a million regrets. Not being more skeptical, calling people names when I should have listened to what they were saying. Look, when someone makes a claim, there's only one question that's important at the very beginning, which is the claim true or not? So I say, you committed murder, or you rigged the last election. Before you attack me as a crazy person for saying that, maybe you should explain whether you did it or not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And for too long, I participated in the culture where I was like, anyone who thinks outside these pre-prescribed lanes is crazy, is a conspiracy theorist. And I just really regret that. I'm ashamed that I did that. And partly it was age, partly it was the world that I grew up in. So when you look at me and you're like, yeah, of course they're part of the means of control, I'm like, that's obvious to you because you're 28, but I just didn't see it at all. And I'm ashamed of that.
Isn't that what the media tries to do, though?
It's their only purpose.
Right.
They're not here to inform you, really. Even on the big things that really matter, like the economy and war and COVID and like things that really matter that will affect you. No, their job is not to inform you. They are working for the small group of people who actually run the world. They're their servants. They're their Praetorian Guard. And we should treat them with maximum contempt because they have earned it. Like,
that is some crazy stuff, right? Like, when I heard him say that, I was like, it is not going to be too long until he is gone from the mainstream media. I think that he maybe had a conscience crisis, in taking a step back and saying, is what I'm doing, is this right? And then, his text messages leaked about how he don't even like Trump. And, you got all this stuff going on. And then now here he is, no more no more Tucker Carlson on Fox
Yeah.
News. I saw Babylon B. It said, Fox News fires the only reason that people watch Fox News, you know? But so what are your thoughts on him getting fired and what we just played?
I just want to appreciate, first of all, the incredible timeline that we're in, that we're getting hot button news from Full Send Podcast and the Nelk Boys. I think that's hilarious. To me, it's like, what world are we even in anymore? This is crazy. But I will say this: gut instinct, gut reaction, knowing what I know about the media business and knowing how things work, the narrative is always set by the first person to speak. Because of that, there's always going to be people playing catch up, and they'll try and compensate for it in a different way. So, for example, with this thing, Dominion set the narrative. We're suing Tucker Carlson and Fox News, and then Fox News set the narrative. The last person to know was Tucker, so we don't really know what he thinks of this. We don't really know the reasoning behind this. Now, to me, my gut instinct is that Fox News is trying to hedge their bets, trying to avoid losing tons and tons, hemorrhaging tons of money when they're already losing money. And so they're like, look, Tucker, we can put you to the side for a little bit. And Tucker probably gave him the finger and was like, you know what, I'm leaving. I've been waiting to leave. Because the interesting thing about Tucker is he's one of the only, like, quote unquote boomers that really speaks to these young conservatives, man. Like, when he goes to Turning Point, like, I've been in rooms with him where he's spoken. I've been in places where people know him, and young people who are into politics, who love conservatism, love Tucker. They are all about him because he's one of the few people that will say what the people are thinking. And if he doesn't like Trump as president, cool. I think politics has become the sport that since 2016, probably since the Trump era, where you just wear your jersey and you don't question the narrative. And if you've been on conservative Twitter in the last 6 months or so, you'll realize that there's tons and tons of infighting happening now like never before. And I think it's because people are waking up to the fact that there's more complicated, nuanced things that are going on than we realize. And when that questions the overall narrative of, like, conservatism good, Republican good, Democrat bad, people get all sorts of eerie about it because their entire reality is shattering. The thing that they've built their identity on for the past 6 years is shattering. This, like, MAGA, pro-Trump, America first thing. It's not as clear cut as people make it seem. And so I think this Tucker leaving is now another example of that. Well, what's happening behind the scenes at Fox News? What's going on with Tucker Carlson that he's not even, saying the actual reasons? Is he going to go on Joe Rogan? All of these things, I think, are examples of what's been happening on the right side of the politics for, like, the last 6 months. And I'm very hesitant to make assumptions about it because of the things that I've already been through in my professional life in media. I understand that the narrative that is public is not always the real one. And sometimes it's who has the loudest voice gets the final say. And I mean, that's just internet culture now.
I think what you're saying, it makes a lot of sense. And when you were talking about how, when people have their identity wrapped up in this, and then they realize that it's not, essentially not everything that it's made out to be. This is why we need our identity in Christ.
Absolutely. We
cannot put our faith in political figures, our faith in world leaders, our faith in the next microwave ideology that everyone has popping off, the next fad, the next trend. We can't put our identity in that. We have to put our identity in Christ and stay rooted in Christ, because a lot of people, they'll have their identity in Christ and then something interesting comes up and then their identity shifts a little bit. And it's like, you always got to come back to Christ. When people let you down, you just say, oh yeah, well, that's people.
That's people. Exactly. And I think that's what's happening to a lot of people on the right, because, a lot of people on the right are Christian in the sense that they know who Jesus is, and they know a little bit about him. And
Trump is the second coming,
Right. And Trump is, he's up there with Jesus for these people. And so I think what ends up happening is they see these like big monumentous figures that are so like they're real people, right? So we can talk to them, we can relate to them, we can see what they're doing now. Whereas Jesus is the physical embodiment of God. His holiness is unattainable to us. So it may feel at times like some of these political figures are more relatable. We see ourselves in them. We're able to follow their every move. They're telling us everything that they think every minute on Twitter. And so people start to treat them like idols, and then it becomes hard to put everything back into the bag when they mess up or something goes wrong. And Christians in particular, I think, should be well aware that the idea of human depravity does not stop right before celebrities. Like, celebrities are not exempt from human depravity, and to me that's a big eye opener. And not only Tucker but Trump and all these things, it's an eye opener as far as like how much we are really willing to put our place in a man, or trust in a man rather. And I think it's something that we definitely have to avoid as we build a relationship with God, to make sure like he's the rock that we build our identity on. And all this other stuff we can have opinions on, we can discuss, we can be interested in as a hobby. It can be our career if we wanted to. But at the end of the day, who we are is not Republican, is not conservative, is not Democrat, is not anything. Who we are is Christian. And the overflow of that is, it can lead us to vote in one way or another. But it still remains our identity is in Christ.
Amen. And to piggyback off of what you said about depravity not stopping right before celebrity, I think that celebrity culture is it can mask depravity, but to people who are truly in Christ, you can see right through the mask, and you understand that it is actually flooded with some of the most depraved people to ever exist that would not have made it onto the boat.
100%, man. I that can't be overstated enough, because these people live entirely different lives. These people who have who are big public figures, they are not tethered to the reality that we're tethered to as people who may live in a suburb or even in the hood. Like, they're in a different world. People are at their beck and call. Ruslan talks about this all the time, access to excess. These people have unlimited resources at their fingertips, and so their judgment is skewed, their morality is skewed, the things that they say are skewed because they don't understand what regular life looks like. And even if they have grown up regular and amassed some sort of fame, it's very easy to lose sight of it. Like the old saying goes, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I think that's what's happening a lot in politics is people get power and influence. And now with social media and Donald Trump, we've been able to make politicians sexy, pretty much. Like, it's cool to be a politician, to run for Congress, to run for office and all these things. And now you get this clout that you never got as a politician before, and it becomes even more of this huge thing that can really get in the way of not only your relationship with God, but other people looking at you like an idol.
Yeah, it goes back to when people wanted to be movie stars. Everyone was going to Hollywood, and everyone that I grew up around, they want to be rappers, so they're in the studio all the time. Then you want to be social media influencers. That was a wave. Right now, I think a big wave is politics. People want to be politicians. You have the celebrity AOCs, not to single her out, but she's one of the most prevalent, one of the most.
She's a star. Let's be honest. Exactly.
She's getting invited to the Met Gala, and
yep.
She's 100% a star. She's all over, drag queen TV shows, and she is so popular. And so what happens is people crave attention. They crave importance. They want to be validated in their life. They don't want to go their whole entire life without ever making something of themselves. And if you have an opinion, you can be a politician. And even if you don't make it that far, just the little bit of attention that you're going to get by saying some slick comments about something, that can be enough for somebody. And then it creates a culture of political commentators. Even if you don't become a politician, you can just be a political commentator your whole entire life. And that validates you, because now you can have the moral high ground on everybody that you disagree with.
And that brings up a great point about Tucker, which is the intermingling of commentary with actual political office. And that's how power is amassed. A political group or an ideology, and the people who are kind of at the helm of that ideology find power or find a community in the people who are in the media who believe like they do, and then feed them information to make it public. And so there's the classic meme of like a guy standing behind a podium and then a guy a little bit in front of him with a megaphone pointed in the direction of the crowd. Like that is the definition of media right now. Media just takes what the White House wants you to know or the government wants you to know, turns around and amplifies it to the public. Whereas in the past, what media was people sneaking around behind the scenes of the White House and behind the scenes of the government, finding the dirty secrets that nobody wants them to know and blasting it out to the public. That's what it used to be. And so I think like that's where Tucker is kind of coming to this realization of like, oh, I'm not in the industry I thought I was in. I'm really in a branding business. I'm in PR is what I'm in. I'm not in anything. I'm not in anything related to journalism really, because, you know, let's be honest, what's his name? Tucker has been to the White House. Not only has he been to the White House, he's been to Mar-a-Lago. You know, he's been to all these places, just like AOC has been to the White House, or just Steph Curry has been to the White House. Like these people all have these connections to each other, and they relay each other's ideas in exchange for favors. That's how this all works. And this is kind of a tell-all now, but that's what happens. And if you're not on board, you get cut off either by public slander, or, you know, you just get blacklisted and nobody wants to work with you. So it's very much a dark game in politics. So I would tell any Christian that's looking to get into politics, name your price, name the thing that you won't compromise on before you go in, and treat it like a missions field. Don't go in there and just think like I can be friends with these people and they're my colleagues and they're never going to turn their backs on me. It's not true. It's a very dark place to be.
Isn't it interesting how media originally started, news media and journalism originally started with seeking out the corruption and exposing it. And now that the media has become the ones covering up the corruption instead of exposing it, when you have, independent news sources like Project Veritas or like James O'Keefe or like any of these independent news sources that solely focus on exposing the dark side of the government and politics and ideologies that are being pushed on our children. Isn't it funny how those are now called like right-wing extremists instead of true journalism?
That's a quote James O'Keefe always says. He says people always say, why are you far right, because you're always exposing the FBI and you're exposing the White House. And so his retort is always, is the FBI far left? Is the White House far left? Is, Nike far like, are all these big corporations, pharma, are they far left? Because if I'm exposing them and you're calling me a right winger, then wouldn't they be considered on the left? And I think that's a great way to see it, because you see a bigger picture that way. It's beyond Democrat versus Republican. It's like what wants to be hidden versus what is genuine and true. And when you start slicing things up that way, you paint a very different picture of American politics and even global politics. And not to sidetrack everything, but a clear example of that is Bukele out in El Salvador, who was just like, fundamental human rights, cool, that's great, but if you commit a crime, I'm robbing you of your human rights. You don't get a lawyer, you get sent to jail. If you want to eat while you're in jail, you better cut off all the ties that you have with your gang members, because if we find out you're still affiliated and calling jobs, we're not going to give you meals. And so your family now has to pay for your meals. And so like doing all these things would be it would be extreme here in America, but he's prioritizing truth over anything else. And I think that's something that doesn't come easy in politics, and it gets very muddy, but it's just something that we can look at and say, oh, okay, if this is all negative, then there's a positive right there. And Bukele is that. Yeah.
And not to continue being sidetracked, because this is something that I'm super interested in. But it needed it, El Salvador was like the worst, murder capital.
Literally
it was the worst
yeah.
place that you could be. Now they have tourism again. They have the ability to get outside money coming into their economy. They're able to have their kids in schools without worrying about them being kidnapped. It's people may call it extreme, but what else do you want? We've allowed it to go on this long. I was having a discussion.
I would call murdering extreme.
Yeah, I would say murdering is extreme. Kidnapping, trafficking, selling drugs, all that stuff is pretty extreme too. But I was talking to my wife earlier. We were discussing God's patience, right? People like to focus on God's wrath when they're complaining about God. Like, oh, why would God, kill everybody in a flood? It's like, do you know how long he waited? He waited until every thought in a man's heart was sinful. Every single one was evil. So there was no good thoughts coming out of in a man's head, coming out of them.
Wow.
There was no good thoughts, right? The Canaanites waited 400 years, right? Yeah. People make a big deal about, oh, how could God kill the firstborn of Pharaoh? Those are innocent kids, blah, 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 forgetting that Pharaoh was, not only that, but Pharaoh was killing the firstborn of all the Israelites so they didn't overpopulate.
Wow.
So it's, patience is good. Like, you want to give people an opportunity to turn things around. You do. But if they are not going to, and they are not willing to, and if you as God especially know that they're never going to turn around, what you want to do? Then if there's all this evil going on in the world, people will complain, well, why doesn't God do something about it? Well, because when he does, you complain about it too.
Yeah. That's a great point of view, man. Like, I think it's hilarious when people use the critique of like the cruel God. We could always go with the moral presupposition thing and be like, well, what do you mean by cruel? But it's way easier to point out what you just pointed out, that like, well, how long do you want him to wait before he punishes things that are obviously bad, right? Like, that's great, man.
Yeah. So, not to put, I forget his name, definitely not putting him on par with God. That is not what we are doing, what we are doing here. Just in case somebody, screen records this and say, look at John equating president of El Salvador with God. That's not what I'm doing. All I'm saying is that you can only be patient for so long, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Before you got to do something about it, especially if it's hurting innocent people.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
So with that being said, we've been here for an hour. I think we've covered the topics that we would like to cover.
Definitely.
Angel, tell them where they can find you.
Sure. I'm on Instagram _Angel Quiroz. I'm also on YouTube right here. Angel Quiroz. You can go there. I got a bunch of videos, and I'm mainly on Instagram. And if you want to see me be really political and you want to hear my my conspiracy theories and that side of me, you can find me on Twitter _Angel Quiroz. I'm bugging out over there.
Well, now that it's a free, you're allowed to say whatever you want over there.
Yeah.
You're good to go. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. We will be doing another episode of the Why Jesus podcast coming soon. I'm going to have a bunch of cool interviews talking about things that that we see relevant in the culture today, as well as diving deeper into biblical and theological and philosophical concepts as well. But make sure that you subscribe to Angel's channel, my channel, and the Why Jesus Network as well. God bless. And I'll see you on the next one.